Hello and welcome. Today we will be using watercolor paints to color in our stamps and really kind of explore the world of watercolors and how we could use them in our everyday crafting to make beautiful things and enjoy the process. Since our focus today is on coloring, there are a few things to have pre-prepped. Mine are prepped and come with a little bit of cat hair, so we'll get rid of that. So the first thing is you're going to need at least one piece of watercolor paper. Mine is 5x7, and I have stamped 2 of the large images from the mixed floral set on there, and then I let them dry. It's very important to make sure your images are completely dry. You don't want the water reacting with your ink. So I would do that step first, set it aside. Next, I took a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 card front. I used this embossing folder on it to give it that texture. And then I made a frame out of an arch. It does not matter which shape you use. Your goal here is to just make a frame that is going to frame our image. So it doesn't matter which shape, just a frame, preferably in the middle of a piece of cardstock that is already embossed. So we have some texture there. And we are going to use both pieces of this. So don't throw away your insert. We're going to use that. The next item, 2 4 by 5 1/4 inch backgrounds. We are going to stamp on these. We're going to use those for the background stamps. Spoiler alert, I did one already, so you'll only watch me do one on camera to save on time a little. Then I have this stamp from this set on an acrylic block, so I could do my background stamping. Adhesive, I've got a tape runner and some little foam dots so we can give some dimension to stuff. And then probably the most important part of this, since we are going to be watercoloring, is the paint. Now you do not need to use fancy paint for this. I am using a very cheap set. This was the Close to My Heart set. You could buy the same set for like $10, I think, at Top Shelf or 5 and Below. So just very cheap paints. I mean, you could even use kid paints for this. They do not have to be expensive. You just want watercolors that you can play with. I'd say the only important thing is they are watercolors. As you can tell, mine's like even falling apart here. And then, you know, some paint brushes, little dish to put your water in, and then of course some water. And I'm gonna pour some of this little dish right now. The other thing to do, ooh, there's some paper in there. The other thing to do is go ahead and activate your paints by misting them with water. I'm going to get them nice and wet so we could start to work with them. So we're going to do the painting first, that way that could dry while we're doing the background stamping, and then we just have to assemble our cards. I'm going to take this, try to get the cat fur off it. I'm going to stick this down on my sticky mat. And again, this is watercolor paper, and a couple benefits. I mean, if you try to do this method on regular paper, it's just going to warp and you're not going to have a fun time. And the watercolor paper has this beautiful texture to it, which is really going to give your project some dimension and some visual interest. So the watercolor paper, it's, you know, a little more expensive than your cardstock, but it is beautiful and you do need it if you're going to be working with water. So what I am going to do, I didn't really put much thought into it. We're just going to pick a color and go with it. Let's do this one first. So I'm just going to go over here. See, I'm just picking up a little bit of yellow. And with watercolors, the key to it is you don't want it to look perfect. You want it to be flowing. You want it to be loose. You want it to be dreamy. You don't want it to be perfect. So don't try to fill in all the lines. Just lightly do some highlights like this with it. You just want it to be loosely on there. You don't want it to look perfect. You don't want it to look like it was made by a machine. You want it to look like it was indeed watercolored. See how that comes out with just a couple strokes? Again, we'll do this little guy down here. I'm going to wash my brush off a little. And then one thing you could do too is if you want to blend this a little more, see how I cleaned the water off the brush? Go back in there with just a little bit of water and blend it out a little more. Makes it a little smoother, but again, you don't want to fill in every little space. You don't want it to look perfect. You want it to look like it was indeed watercolored. Okay, so now we have these middle things. I'm not a botanist. I don't know all the fancy terms for what we're doing with the flower. All I know is I want those to be this brown. So this brown's kind of dark. So I'm going to go in there like that. Just a little bit of paint. You don't need a ton of color either. I'm going to rinse my brush off a little. I'm just going to spread this a little to make it a little lighter. Now, in my prep, I did not remember to grab a paper towel, so excuse me for a second. One of the tricks with watercolors, when you're coloring your images, if you get too much color on, take a paper towel, you can lightly dab, you can pick some of that color up. See how that works? So if you're a little too heavy-handed, while it's wet, go in there and pick a little up. And then this, just add a little bit of clean water and just smooth it out a little. And it's so easy. And again, you could do this even with a set of Crayola kid paints. They don't have to be fancy paints. It's just the beauty of watercolors. They are so easy to work with. Once you get started, it becomes a bit addicting. So I got this green on my brush, but we're only going to do a couple of these leaves because this brush is a little big. I like to use a smaller brush for the stem. So again, just going in there. Now this green is a little bright. And the good thing with watercolors is you can mix them and you can change that. So I'm grabbing a smaller brush right now. So those were a little bright. Let's go in a little with this color too. See how that bleeds together and it makes the new green? It's like a brownish green now. I like that much better. So we're going to do that over here. Might need a little more water. I don't remember. I think it was that color I used. And it is really that simple to fix a mistake and correct something that you don't like. Again, just gonna grab a little more water. Into the paint it goes, and onto my leaf it goes. So the secret to this really is that watercolor paper. You want to make sure you're using watercolor paper. Again, if you do this on regular paper, it's going to be a mess. It's going to warp. It's not going to absorb any of the water like this does. And you can see that as this dries, it will get lighter too. That's another thing to keep in mind with the watercolors. They tend to dry a little lighter. And you can see I'm being a little sloppy there. It does not matter. I could go back again. Look at that. All fixed. It's very forgiving to do this with the watercolors. You just have to be a little quick on it when you see something happening. Do this little leaf over here. A little bit of color for him. And we're almost halfway done with our coloring already. The watercolors, I think, really does make it quick. It makes it easy. You want it to be flowy, so you're not going to spend a lot of time trying to be perfect, because if you're trying to be perfect, that's kind of defeating the purpose of the watercolors. Okay, so now we got these little flowers. I have no idea what colors those would be in nature, so you know what? You got yellow. We're going to go with this pink. These are old paints. You can see how they're kind of dried up a little, but it does not matter. You squirt that water on there and they still work. So yeah, if you bought the Close to My Heart paint set to get out of your closet, great way to use it. You could do this method with re-inkers too. You could do this method with your watercolor markers. You would just scribble a little, make a puddle of color, and then pick it up with a paintbrush. You could also use the very cheap water brushes. I just didn't have any that were clean. Mine have paint all over them right now, and it takes effort to clean them, so we're using just a regular paintbrush. I'll go in here, finish his off. Now, if you want to get fancy, what you'll notice is a lot of times when things are watercolored, they will have the paint splatters on them. I don't think we're going to attempt that today, but what you could do, maybe we will attempt it just so you can see it. So we're going to stop talking about that. We'll come back to the paint splatters in a little bit. We're going to do our other image first. So these little flowers again, make those pink. They'll dry off a little lighter than it looks right now, so it'll be a very soft color. Just picking up a little more water, a little paint. Again, not trying to make it perfect, just very loose, very quick. And then we're going to let it dry, and when it dries, it'll be magical. They say when you are using watercolors, every project you do is going to go through an ugly phase. It's like its gangly teenage years where you're going to look at your project and think, oh, this is terrible, I should just throw it away. Don't throw it away. Keep going, let it dry, and then look at it once it has matured, and you'll be surprised at how beautiful it comes out. Pretty much everything I've made, I've had those feelings too, but you just stick with it, keep going, and it becomes beautiful. A little more color in that guy. Okay, so now, this is going to be interesting. So tulips. I don't know what color a tulip's supposed to be. Like I said, I'm not a botanist, but I like purple. Let's go purple. So I just squirted some water on here to make this nice and juicy. This one was looking really dry. We're going to go in here. Very light touch. Just smear it on. It's okay if it pools. It'll give you a more interesting look. I like how it looks when you get the little puddles. I think it gives it depth, and it gives it, you know, more interest. So I tend to use a lot of water. Try not to use as much paint, but using the colors is fun. So sometimes you just want to use a lot of color. There we go. One more little tulip over here. Isn't it pretty? And look at that, we are almost done with our coloring already. I'm just gonna go back, put a little more paint at the bottom here. You see how so my paint's very wet right now, so I could pick the paint up on the brush. I could put it on the bottom, and you see how it'll naturally bloom like that. I really like that for giving things depth and, you know, making it look more interesting, and it's just like a natural shading. Okay, we got more leaves. We're going to go straight into this color for the leaves today. Again, not being super careful. Not too worried about it. You don't want it to look perfect. You want it to look watercolored. Should be, you know, kind of natural and flowy. I'm going to pay a little more attention around where we have the overlap, but that's and this paint is not wet enough. That's a little dark. I'm going to share some of that color over here, share some of the color over here, pick some of this color up. And you can very easily move the color around on your page too. Just don't let it dry. And just being a little careful around this guy. And be careful over here a little too around these guys. But we do not want it to look perfect, even though we're being careful. Oh, that's a little dark. Pick up some water. See how I just lightened that with the water? That's really the secret, is figuring out how much water to use and then trying to control it a little bit. See, this paint's too dry. We're almost done, but I'm gonna make that nice and wet for now. Now, if you want to, you can also, when you stamp your image on your watercolor paper, you can heat emboss watercolor paper. I think I just colored some air back there. Oh well, it'll be fine. So you could heat emboss your watercolor paper, and that'll make it easier to stay inside the lines. But again, you want it to look loose and flowy, and you don't want it to be perfect. Got too much color there, just dab it off a little. And we just used colors straight out of the tin over here. I did not mix anything. These are just, you know, the basic set that Close to My Heart sold. I've seen this exact same set at Pop Shelf though. So I'm pretty sure it'll be at Dollar General. Very cheap too. All right, so there is our watercoloring is done. It was that quick, it was that easy. We're gonna set this aside and we're going to do the other pieces of our card while that dries. So I really wanted to make our watercolored image the star of the show. So the other elements for the card, I made them a bit muted and really tried to make sure that they wouldn't upstage our flowers. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna create 2 panels that are background stamped. So I just chose a very neutral color. This is basic beige. We'll see if I could get this open. I always struggle with these Close to My Heart ones. Oh, got it open and got it all over my thumb. Now my thumb is beige. Basic beige thumb. Okay, so what I'm gonna do with the background stamp, you want it to be random, but you don't want it to be crazy random. So usually I pick a spot to start in, right? So we got our first image. Now I'm gonna stamp again. I'm gonna turn my stamp. I'm gonna do it at a different spot. See how we got a little bit of space there? I'm gonna turn the stamp again. We're gonna leave some space open. And then we're just gonna like continue this kind of randomness of turning it, stamping it. Let's do that. Let's go off the page over here a little. Let's see. Do we have one? We do have some from that direction. Do we have any from this? Let's go this direction. Yeah, there we go. I'm just trying to fill up some of the blank space without making it look like I planned where things were going to go. That makes sense. There we go. So there we have our background. That's all there is to that. So I'm going to put that away. We're going to set this aside to dry. Now, these should be almost dry here. And what we're going to do, we're going to decide which one we want where. So you have choices. We made 2 of these backgrounds, so we could do fussy cut on top of the background for the frame, or we could do just, excuse me, the watercolor background paper as the background on the frame. It really doesn't matter. They're both pretty, and the watercolor paper has such a beautiful texture to it. So it's really up to you. I think what we're going to do to keep this short is we are going to use that as the frame for one, and then we will fussy cut the other. Actually, I think I just changed my mind because I think this would look pretty in the frame with some of the flowers poking out. So let's fussy cut them both. I apologize. We're going to have a, excuse me, a boring couple minutes here as I cut, but that is just how it goes. So we're going to cut this out. You'll find that the watercolor paper is thicker than your cardstock, so you'll notice it's a little tougher to cut, but you can do it just fine with your regular scissors. And I'm just loosely cutting around the flowers, not trying to make it perfect at all. Again, we want this to look natural. We want it to look loose. We don't want perfection. We want it to look like we watercolored this and it is handmade. So perfection is really our enemy here. So just, randomly around there, loosely following the shape, not trying to be too exact, not trying to be too close to it. Nice and loose. Now we might go back to this one in a few minutes because I want to poke some out of the frame, so we might have to cut into it a little more, but this is basically how, I hope I got all that in frame. I didn't even check to make sure I was under the camera for that. Apologize if I was out of the frame. I don't really make very many videos. I'm trying to do more videos, get more adept at it, but it takes time. Okay, so there's our first one, just loosely cut out. Here is our second one. Again, just loosely cut around it. There we go. That's annoying. Get rid of that. Sorry, that got a little violent, didn't it? It was just in my way and I was not having it. I got a little closer than I'd like there, but it'll be okay. So again, just quickly, try not to worry too much about this. And honestly, we probably should have done the splatter a step ago. Should have done the splatter before I put those paints away, but we'll make it work. So I was not a big fan of the splatter until I started doing it. I was like, oh, it looks a little messy, ruining my perfect image by putting this random paint over it. So hard to control the splatter. What if I mess up? What if it's not even? But what it really does is it helps hide imperfections, and with the watercolor, it really makes things look more finished, which is kind of odd because you think paint splatters, how does that equate to something looking more polished and finished, right? All right. All right, so we got that loosely cut out. So we got our two images done. We've got our background stamping done. Okay, we're gonna tempt fate here and we're gonna do the splatter real quick. So for the splatter, I am going to take out my water brush. And you can see my water brush is very dirty with the black. And looking in this, we're going to squirt the water on what appears to be the black paint. Dip my brush. I'm trying to get the bristles. Yeah, they were all stuck together, but just tap, 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 tap. I know you think it's going to look ruined, but trust me, it won't. This adds to it. There we go. Okay, so now put this back aside. I'm going to move my dirty paint water. I'm not tempted to drink it today. Put that away. Got a little bit of water over here. So I'm giving these splatters a couple seconds to dry. I will be honest, I am the type of person who usually makes things dry instead of waiting for them to dry. So you know what we're gonna do? Okay, we're gonna let the other one air dry while we work this piece. So if you're going to use your heat gun like that, recommend starting from the bottom so you don't smudge your little splatters. Helps keep them looking splatter-like. I think actually, you know what? I apologize for the noise. We're gonna do this one more time. We're not going to talk about how many times I have burnt myself on the embossing gun. It just happens with the heat. I burn myself when I do the wax melting. You don't want to see me with a hot glue gun either. So I'm lining this up, seeing how I want it to poke it on my frame, right? And what I'm noticing is I'm covering a lot of my background. So I'm going to turn my background. See that? I just rotated it a little. And now we can see a little more of that background stamp. So I'm looking at this. excuse me, I like it. I think we're going to tape it down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tape the outside first, just around the edge, and then I'm going to slide my flowers in. So I've got a tape runner. Helps if I open it. I've already got paint all over my hands. You can tell it's been a fun day when the hands are covered in paint, right? Now, if you're ambitious, you could also do this as a shaker card. I was not ambitious enough to try that on camera, but you could definitely, you know, use some foam, pop that up, and make this into a shaker with some acetate. After this. I'm just going to slide him in there, like that. Now I'm going to put something heavy on this when we get done, just to flatten it out. But for now, that's how it's going to look. And then I have these pre-cut sentiments from Stampin' Up. And I think that works very well with this one. So we're just going to put a little bit of repositionable on that in case I change my mind later. And then you have your card fronts. I don't know if you guys make card fronts or if you do your whole card at once. A lot of times I just make the fronts and then I glue them on when I am ready to actually send them to someone. So there is card number 1, complete with cat fur, our watercolored image. And now let's do card number 2. And uh-oh, look, this got wet. Let's see if we could save it. Now, if something like that happens to you, and if it bothers you, you could always trim that down a little more. It doesn't really bother me, so I'm leaving it as it is. And for this one, we're gonna go like this. And, you know, I don't know if I have any, I don't have any twine handy, but maybe I'll add some twine later and then post an image of what that looks like. So this is basically how we're gonna compose this card. Right here. Right like that. If I had the twine handy, I'd put the twine right there. And then I would probably put the sentiment down here, or you could do the sentiment up there. So let's pop this up. Let's give it some dimension. I am an over adheser when it comes to the pop dots. I always use way too many. I just figure I want it to stay popped up, right? So I gotta use a ton. And honestly, with that dried, you could barely tell we had a little mishap. So that's straight enough for me. And then this, yeah, if I had my liquid glue handy, I would get the liquid glue out to make sure it sticks down. But what you could do is you could tape it, and then as it dries, if it's still a little wonky, you could always stick some glue under there if you need to. So there's card number 2, and again we have all these cute little sentiments. Let's look for something small. Oh, we got thinking of you. Oh, wouldn't that look cute? Let's do that. I know I didn't put my twine on yet, but I think that will look very cute. Where did I put my dots? And then this is going to line up like this. So I'm putting the dots on the bottom because that's already got some dimension to it. Here we go. Thinking of you. I really like these pre-made sentiments from Stampin' Up. I think those are really cute. And then again, I usually only make the card fronts, but I'll show you real quick. I got some pre-cut card bases here. And then these, I just glue them down like this. See that? I want to put the twine on so we won't actually glue that one. And yeah, it's a little off center, but dare we ruin our card by trying to fix it? Let's do it. Let's try to fix it. Even if we break the whole thing. Okay, we're gonna leave it alone now. There we go. So again, that's what that one will, I made it worse. Come on, let's try to get you straight as we can. There we go. That's straight enough for us. So again, we've made these 2 card fronts. The focus of this was really watercoloring, showing you how easy it was to do that watercoloring. Again, you don't need fancy supplies. I used those cheap little supplies from Creative Memories, not Creative Memories, close to my heart. You could buy that same kit for like $10, I think, at Dollar General or Pop Shelf. You could use any type of paintbrush, really doesn't matter. I would try to get, you know, one that's thinner though, so, because you saw those tight places. If you need a paintbrush, get, you know, one thin one thicker one. And there are our watercolored cards. You will notice that the color is a little chalky. That is because we are using that very cheap paint. If you use more expensive paint, it will be more translucent, not quite as opaque. But again, you don't want to spend a lot of money on paints. You don't need to, just to get it a little more translucent. It looks fine even with that little bit of opaqueness. Well, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you find watercoloring fun, and happy coloring.